What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Friday edition of Back Your Play with Q. As always, I'm your host, Rich Quinones. You can hear us now on Sports Radio 1029 FM, the game, Southwest Florida's newest game in town, part of Coastal Sports Network, as well as Broad Street South, my YouTube channel, Rich Q on Q, Spotify, Amazon Music, um, Google Music, as well, Pod Chaser. And we are brought to you by our very good friends over at Fresh Roasted Coffee. Nothing like waking up in the morning to a delicious cup of coffee to get your day started. Myself in the summer, he'd prefer good iced coffee or cafe brew, a little latte, if you will. And thanks to our new coffee sponsor at Fresh Roasted Coffee, you too can enjoy the delicious assortments of flavors Fresh Roasted Coffee has to offer. You can click the link in my show notes, bio notes as well right now for a special offer from our great friends at Fresh Roasted Coffee. Take that coffee quiz on their site. See what blends and roasts match up with your taste buds, if you will. And as we alluded to, before you check out, you put in the promo code BYP20 for 20% off your first purchase. Again, Fresh Roasted Coffee, the official sponsor and the coffee of Back Your Play with Q. And with that, we welcome in someone who's never thirsty for football knowledge, our very good friend, Lloyd Vance, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on Sports Radio 1029 FM, The Game, and of course, Broad Street South and Coastal Sports Network. The weather has been oppressive this week, so I decided, you know what, Lloyd? Let's look at the hot seat, the proverbial hot seat, and head coaches on the hot seat. And I feel like over the last several years, we have the usual suspects. But as always, how are you, my friend?
Great, Q. And yeah, it's unfortunate. Every year, around 6 to 7 coaches, there's vacancies around the National Football League. And, there's always some surprise guys out there. But with owners like David Tepper, no coach feels safe. It's not like the olden days where Jeff Fisher, a
Sure.
guy like him, and Belichick, they're there for 19, 20 years in one spot. So,
Right.
every owner's looking for that new fancy toy and trying to improve their team.
Yeah, and it's an interesting point. I brought it up earlier today on Middays with Q from 12 to 2 on 1029 FM The Game. I was talking about the same exact thing you were because I mentioned Belichick going to the inside the NFL. And I said, think about the longevity and the success rate he had for so many years. And yet, Pats fans were kind of getting annoyed with him at the end. And look at all the rings, all the Super Bowls, all the accolades, Mount Rushmore of head coaches, Hall of Fame, winning Super Bowls, it seems, every year, every other year with the Pats. But yet, shelf life, right? It gets shortened sometimes when you don't win. And from an odds standpoint, we'll start with two usual suspects. One of them right now, short odds on two head coaches, respectively. It's funny because Matt Eberflus, there was an article, Fox Sports actually has him in running for coach of the year plus 900, but yet he's also one of the first head coaches to get fired at plus 450, along with Robert Saleh at plus 350. So head coach of the Bears, 18%. Robert Saleh, 22% with the Jets. Let's start with the Bears. Does he get a little bit of wiggle room, betting numbers aside, odds aside, because he's got a number one draft pick, top overall pick in Caleb Williams? Does he have a little wiggle room if they struggle this year, but yet you see some progressions as the season goes on from the quarterback? Or do you believe that he rightfully so should be on the hot seat?
I believe rightfully so. He should be on the hot seat. He has a losing record. Last year they come in 7-10, and he's been there about 3 years already. So, yeah, do you want to push the reset button with the brand new quarterback, Caleb Williams, coming in there? Sure, that's going to help them out. Now, his buddy is Ryan Poles, who's the general manager there. He kind of brought him, they were a package deal when they came in together. So they seem to have a little leeway with McCaskey family in
Mm-hmm.
terms of sticking around. But this is a key season for the Bears because, as you're saying, a lot of people are looking at for that come up. They put a lot into this roster over the last two free agencies and drafts, and now it's time to come to fruition. But the big problem is, this is a very competitive NFC North because the Lions are playing very well with Campbell. You have the Packers, who are the
Yep. Good
darling
point.
of the NFL. They're a young squad, and you would just wonder, yeah, they may improve going from 7 wins to like 8, 9 wins, but will that be enough to save Eberflus's job? And I always say the big thing is the calling card in terms of the coach. They have a specialty. And Eberflus is defensive coach, and this team allowed more points than they scored last year. They were negative 19 in net points. So, they've struggled at some point. So it's going to be interesting to see if he sticks around and if this team can grow with their young quarterback.
And Robert Salah with the Jets plus 350, 22%. I mean, look, you could have argued he could have been fired 2 years ago. You could have been argued he could have been fired after last season. They bring back Aaron Rodgers coming off that injury. We know about the defense. I just don't think he's a very good head coach. I know it's kind of low bearing fruit. We picked on him for the last several years. Seemed by all accounts a really nice guy. Um, he's not made for the New York market. I think he's in over his head. And if the quarterback falters and gets hurt, and all of a sudden this potential 9 to 10 win team finishes the season with 6 or 7 wins, or they lose 6 out of 7 and they're not competitive. I understand losing the quarterback 4 offensive snaps in. It's a gut punch, especially when you put all your eggs in a basket with a future Hall of Famer and Aaron Rodgers. And the season went south relatively quickly last year, even though they did win that game against Buffalo. I feel as though he is the new Wayne Fonts, right? I mean, how many chances you're going to give this guy? So, and no disrespect to Fonts, but where are you right now um, with um, with him?
Yeah, and then I'll bring up a name from I'm from the Philadelphia area, so Marion Campbell, and it's similar. This team has some talent, but he just a guy that's better being a coordinator rather than head coach. There's a lot that comes with being a head coach. You're the CEO of the team, the face of the team. And I just don't know what kind of handle he has offensively. He's kind of handled it off to Nathaniel Hackett to kind of run that offense. I know that's Aaron Rodgers' guy that he brought in, but Salah's another one, defensive coach, and his team, they allowed 20.9 points per game,
Yeah,
and they only scored 15, close to 16 points per game. And you just wonder, is there enough? And both him and Eberflus are like in the last years of their contract, they're kind of lame ducks. And when you see that around the league, guys that I talk to are like, well, if they don't want to give a coach an extension going into
right.
season, that says a lot in terms of the confidence of the owner. So, they have the pieces there with the Williams brothers. They have Hassan Reddick over there. Hopefully they can figure out that contract. But the defense is very solid, but they have to get Aaron Rodgers to play at a high level. He definitely is on a hot seat. And if this thing starts badly, because we talked about the
The
beginning of their
schedule.
season, their schedule's tough. And, they're at San Francisco to start the season. Then they play Tennessee, New England, Denver. Okay. But then they have Buffalo week 6 and, Houston week 9. So the hits just keep coming. And he better have this team ready to roll. And with Aaron Rodgers not being there, let's not forget, he was excused. He
Yeah.
was in Egypt or wherever he was. But, this team right now, they don't seem to be on the same page going into training camp.
No, good points on the AFC East. By the way, that was one of our top viewed BYP editions this past week when we did our AFC East preview. And you can really make a case for a couple coaches within that division on the hot seat as well. Again, it is a Friday edition of Back Your Play with Q. Rich Quinones here. Lloyd Vance, kind enough to join us, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football and Sports Radio 1029 FM. The Game, Southwest Florida's new game, is in town, and we are part of Coastal Sports Network. Episode BYP from our very good friends over at Fresh Roasted Coffee. I mentioned that promo. You'll click the link in my show notes. You'll check out the special offer, Fresh Roasted Coffee. You can take their coffee quiz and on their site to see what blends and roast. I'm all about the dark roast. I put a couple ice cubes in it. I am good to go. And again, you'll get to have an opportunity with the promo code when you check out your order. You can enter the promo code BYP20 for 20% off your first purchase. So good stuff on Saleh. I just think it's a situation where you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. You can't make the excuses, well, Rodgers is coming off an injury. And let's be honest, they wanted to appease Hackett as well. Saleh is a yes man. You can't be a puppet in the NFL. You just can't. You're not going to last. So Saleh, Eberflus, 350, 450 respectively. Let me give you 2 or 3 obvious ones. I think Mike McCarthy, it's low bearing fruit, but think about it. 5th year, 42-25, 1-3 in the playoffs, lots of double-digit winning seasons with the Dallas Cowboys, but no Dan Quinn, take over more of the play calling duties. I hate the way this roster has been built. I think the Dallas Cowboys are in store for a very long season, and I bet you, truth serum to a couple Cowboys fans, one of my very good friends is a Cowboys fan, and he told me, be bad, blow it up, get rid of Dak, get rid of McCarthy. I feel as though Jerry Jones has been more patient than usual, but You look at Mike McCarthy, and right now you're sitting at plus 450, 18%. He's out during the course of the season or when the season ends. So right now, Mike McCarthy in Dallas, hot seat.
I definitely agree with you. He's another coach that has not gotten his attention. And the thing is, with McCarthy, Jerry Jones was like, "Oh, we're all in." And this all season just been kind of like blah. They signed Ezekiel Elliott, they brought
Horrible.
him back, but other than that, they really have not done a lot with this team. And you're right, Q. It's setting up as a tear down situation because McCarthy last year to contact Dak Prescott last year was contract, and then you have two offensive guys in C.D. Lamb and Michael Parsons trying to get new contracts as well. So just so much soap opera already swirling around his team as they're getting ready to go to training camp. And I just don't think it's going to get any better. And I agree with you that there was only so much goodwill in terms of they're the only team that's had 3 12-win seasons in a row, but the playoff success has just not been there. Jerry Jones, I think, and Stephen Jones, who's stepping in a lot, his son, in the COO role, they may have said enough's enough, and they're just going to see where the chips fall where they may with this season. But I anticipate it's going to be another tough one because the NFC East, there's a different champion every year,
Yeah.
and they won the division last year. And I think the Eagles are a little bit ahead of them. So I think definitely he should be on the hot seat.
You can't, you have to, nothing less than a Super Bowl appearance. And even then, you have to win the Super Bowl. Period. I feel as though this is it. Like, enough is enough. Fisher cut bait already. Enough is enough with this guy. You can go
Yeah.
12-5 every single solitary season, but you get bounced in the divisional round or the NFC Championship. Get to the Super Bowl. Finally win a Super Bowl. You haven't done diddly since the 90s, right? So it's like, come on. You have to make a change sometimes. And sometimes you do have to rip the Band-Aid off. I think that's going to be the case with the Cowboys. Again, Friday edition of Back Your Play with Q. We are brought to you by Fresh Roast of Coffee. And of course, our wonderful friends over at Play It Again Sports, 1450 Clemens Bridge Road in Deptford, New Jersey. Use sports equipment and more. Right now in the store, open 7 days a week. Check out, go to Google, playitagainsports.com, put in a location. Deptford, as always, follow us on X at RichQonQ, at Lloyd Vance, kind enough to join us, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on Sports Radio 1029 FM. The Game, Southwest Florida's newest game in town. We are part of Coastal Sports Network. You can also give them a follow as well at CSN Florida. So you got the M&M man, you got McCarthy, you got Saleh, you got Eberflus sticking with the NFC East. Listen, I'm going to get hammered for this, and I'm sure I'm going to get hammered from your family and friends, but how do you not put Nick Sirianni, who, by the way, is not even on the board, the big board? How do you not put, if I would put odds right now, I would say plus 650 for Sirianni. And it boils down to this. And I mentioned this earlier on Middays with Q, and you can agree or disagree, have at it. There is a disconnect. I don't need to be in this locker room. There's a disconnect, an obvious disconnect between where the head coach is at and where the franchise quarterback is in Jalen Hurts. And when you have to bring in new coordinators, defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, who have had experience in the NFL on the sidelines, and you've got a head coach who I believe is very immature when it comes to just doing things the right way as a head coach. I'm not saying he's a bad head coach. I don't like the antics, but a coach like that obviously and evidently has thin skin, he's got to look over his shoulder. That's a recipe for disaster. You already saw some of the issues come out afterwards with him and other coordinators not being on the same page after the season. They were 10-1. They dropped 6 of 7. They got bounced by Tampa Bay. I said on the record then they should have gotten rid of Nick Sirianni. Not on the big board, on Q's big board right now when you look at some of these numbers, but on my list, yes, Nick Sirianni certainly has to be in the hot seat right now.
That's Q. He's on my board and a lot of Eagles fans as well. And it's a situation, he lost 6 to 7 games to end the season, and that was an embarrassment against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That team flat out didn't
They
show
quit.
up, and you know Jeffrey Lurie, Howie Roseman, they brought him in, and I think they had a talk with him. They said, "Look, all right, we're going to blame this on Desai, Brian Johnson, the two coordinators that kicked them out the door, and he was able to stay." But Sirianni on the last year of his
Yeah.
contract, yes, he has a winning record, and it's pretty stellar record, and he made 2 Super Bowl in 2022. But I worry, like you were saying, did he lose this locker room? And particularly his quarterback, Jalen Hurts, has said some things this offseason. You just wonder if these two are on the same page and the dynamic there. So he's brought in Kellen Moore now to run an offense. You have Fangio running the defense. What is Sirianni doing? You know, is he going to be a CEO type head coach? I mean, what is his calling card? You're just not seeing that. So I firmly agree with you that he should be on a hot seat, given all this ambiguity around where he stands in his career.
Yeah, those are really good points that you bring up. And I just want to highlight and illustrate a couple. First of all, you're right. What's your role? You know, you glorified cheerleader at the end of the day. And you mentioned the disconnect between the franchise quarterback, who, when they were 10-1, we could have argued in the MVP. Now, the narrative and perception changes if they win that Super Bowl, right? You got a young, fiery, walk the walk, back it up, talk the talk head coach. You got a franchise quarterback. Here we go, MVP. But that's not the case. They lost the game. You move on. You're 10-1, 6 of 7 slide, and you lose to Tampa, as you mentioned, didn't even show up. We know that quarterbacks and head coach don't need to be in love with each other, right? Terry Bradshaw, Chuck Noll, you can have that type of interesting relationship. Sims and Parcells, mutual respect, but Parcells would always hammer Sims, even when they were winning and they were winning Super Bowls and they were getting to the playoffs. So there can be these marriages that last. But I also believe the way the NFL is constructed now, when you have a team that basically got their soul snatched out of them, the 49ers ripped the soul and the heart out of the Philadelphia Eagles, and then they just didn't show up for a month. Heads have to roll. We can blame the players, we can blame the coordinators, but in any other walk of life, the CEO is gone, the boss is gone, the manager's gone. Sirianni should have been gone. So to your point, if this team struggles and they're 2-4, 2-5 out of the gate, and he's looking dazed and confused, it's rare we've seen this team, this organization, this franchise in the Philadelphia Eagles make an in-season change like that. It's got to be really bad, right? I mean, the Giants are
Yeah,
one of those franchises as well. We don't want to do it. It's got to be really bad. So we had no choice to do it with Judge. We had no choice to do it with McAdoo. We had no choice to do it with Shermer. But it will be very telling if this team is 2-5 and the quarterback starts griping a little bit.
yeah, and with his record and his
Yes.
success, the modicum of success that he's had, he's competing with Andy Reid and Kyle Shanahan, who ate his lunch, as you said, that just broke that team. And it's just like, okay, are you going to rebound in this situation? You're a lame duck coach on the last year of your contract. Obviously, the confidence is not there with the front office that was in the past, and a lot of his theatrics, as you said, have not endeared him to a lot of people around the league. And some of the players, some of the coaches that I've talked to want to kick their butt, So
Yeah.
he's not helping himself. This is a huge season for the Philadelphia Eagles. Lots of expectations given the roster. That roster is fully loaded in terms of offense, and they're rebuilding their defense. But a lot of is going to hang on this outcome for Nick Sirianni and the staff.
Yeah, we can use any type of superlative, right? I mean, the 49ers dog walked them. It reminded me of those great kung fu flicks in the 70s and early 80s where, you would dispatch your enemy, right? And you would literally just throw that punch and just grab his heart, rip it. The guy would still be alive, but you take a moment just to show him the heart, to show him the trophy, and that's it. And then all of a sudden, you know, life ends for the opposition. That's what the 49ers did. They just went and pulled it out and showed it to the Philadelphia Eagles. So Sirianni on the big board, as Lloyd likes to say. Let me give you a couple other ones that I think might be a little obscure. Well, one I don't think is obscure is Brian Daboll. You go from coach of the year, great second season, third season, not so good. You lose the starting quarterback, but yet you paid him 160 prior to the season over 4 years, 15, 18, and 1-1 in the playoffs. Had the big road win against the Minnesota Vikings. And again, it's hard to equate, or I guess you can say, make a fair assessment when you lose your quarterback. But I kind of liken him to almost Sirianni. Like, I'm not a fan of the clownish techniques. And listen, the whole Hard Knocks, they're only showing you what they want. I heard people, talking heads sit there and say, I can't believe Joe Shane put Saquon Barkley on speaker. What the hell? I mean, obviously, yes, they're going to do that. What are they not? Is he going to have a conversation with himself, like the dude that's walking in the mall that doesn't want to be solicited? He's just talking to himself. No, you're not going to do that. So I can live with that with Shane, but Dayball, I'm not a fan of, and he's a very good football mind and offensive mind. I'll give him that. I love the breakdown with Daniels and everything. They were salivating over that kid. It was pretty evident. I mean, my God, can you make it any more noticeable? Jesus, it's like when you're out with your spouse and all of a sudden the good looking girl walks by. I mean, and your eyes start to shift. Don't make it so obvious, right? I mean, read the room a little bit. My God. But anyway, with that being said, I just, I don't like the makeup of this team. I don't like the roster building of this team. And I think the bloom is off the rose with Dable because everyone was thinking, man, he's coming from Buffalo. Here you go. Him and Josh Allen. Now him and Daniel Jones. It hasn't panned out. I don't even believe Daniel Jones is going to be ready for the season. And I think that will spell the end of Brian Daboll, especially if this team wins 4 or 5 games.
Yeah, Q would be crazy because it'd be like my how the mighty have fallen. Because think back, they win that playoff game. Everybody's so excited. Daniel Jones has kind of solidified himself as their starting
I was one
quarterback,
of
and,
them.
and Joe Shane and everybody they believe him. They give him the contract. And Dayball, you said, gets all the flowers of Coach of the Year and all that. And unfortunately, it's a what have you done for me lately league. And last year, Giants 6-11. And then you start looking at this all season, and yeah, Malik Neighbors is a nice piece that they brought in. But when your quarterback's probably not going to be ready, as Daniel Jones has that ACL injury pretty late in the season, midway through the season last year,
Yep.
um, it's just going to be tough to overcome. And there's just the roster just does not have a lot in terms of playmakers. Yes, Burns coming over that's a nice piece, but I've been watching this Hard Knocks thing as well, and I was thinking the same thing, Q. Dayball is on a hot seat right away, and Shane should be as well because when you look at this team, the Mara family, as you said, for years they've been known for all right, let's stick with our guy, at least give him,
Too loyal.
you know, yeah, sometimes too loyal with some of these guys like McAdoo. How many years they give him when
But
everybody say
Coughlin,
get
see,
rid of this
Coughlin, I
guy.
think you could, I think the Coughlin mess was a lot of it
Yeah,
because of Beckham,
sure.
right? And he didn't see eye to eye with Merritt. But to your point, and I apologize for cutting you off. I've
Yeah,
been doing
sorry.
it for 15 plus years. Yeah, I watched that Hard Knocks nonsense, and I just I want my coach to be a certain way. And I love fiery and I love passionate, but I'm not a fan of the chewing somebody's ass out like constantly. Like it's just after a while, in one moment, hey, that's the way you sling it. Then the next, where the hell you throwing? I mean, I, I I understand the tough love, but I think sometimes these coaches know the camera's on them and they feed off of it and they live for it. But ultimately, he's made some really goofy decisions. Now he's going to, quote, take over the play calling. We saw he butted heads with Wink Martindale, right? So Martindale gets jettisoned, or, thanks for your loyalty and the best of luck, wink, wink. We're pushing you out the door. And then the head coach is sitting there. So yeah, I agree with you. And by the way, he's at plus 1250. Let me give you a couple obscure ones. Maybe you have them on the big board.
Sure.
Maybe you don't. Dennis Allen in New Orleans.
Dennis Allen is another coach that I've written down and I talked about on my show. The reason being, Q, is their team is constantly in no man's land with the New Orleans Saints. They're 8-8, not anymore, but 9-8. They're just good enough to say, okay, we had a shot in a very bad division, but I just don't see him as a difference maker. He came in there, took over from Sean Payton in the past when Payton was suspended, and the team kind of does some nice things, but they're just stuck in neutral, and maybe that they'll make the Benson family will make a change, but
Quarterback issues too. Look,
yeah, Derek
look at his
Carr is
record with
key.
the Raiders combined and quarterback issues. Who are you going to trust?
They
Who are you
gave up a
sticking under
lot
center?
to get him. They gave up a lot to get him, and he is just not produced for them. And they have a kid they drafted, Spencer Rattler, who I like too. So we'll see if he's going to be the backup. But uh, it's crazy because of Derek Carr, I just don't see him getting it done. So him and Dennis Allen definitely are a hot seat.
So he's sitting right around your 17, 18% as well. We mentioned Sirianni, Eberflus, Saleh, McCarthy, Dable. Here's an interesting name. I'll give you two interesting names. And coincidentally enough, for our Florida audience, I mentioned this on Middays with Q earlier today from 12 to 2. Doug Pederson. I think last year they were 8-3, right? So they dropped what, six out of their last uh, seven, or five out of their last six. I got to do my liberal arts math. And Caldwell got fired, right? Lawrence took a step back. They made the playoffs a couple of years ago. I remember when they drafted Lawrence and they drafted ETN, you should have fixed the offensive line. The kid's still getting um, hammered and knocked on his ass. And I think Peterson, it's almost as though, okay, we know you won a Super Bowl with the Philadelphia Eagles, but this is a different animal here. I feel as though that owner, look, we know his aspiration is to move that team to London. I feel as though it's the worst kept secret in the NFL. If he could, he would stick that team, I mean, in London. That's their second home. I mean, they draw more out in London than they do with Jacksonville. But does Doug get a pass because now it's the first season, the first year of Lawrence under that new contract, right? Or is this a situation where, and Lawrence's numbers are comparable to Daniel Jones too, by the way, just throwing it out there. And I like Trevor Lawrence, but where you at right now with Jacksonville and Doug Peterson?
Shad Khan's the owner there, and Trent Baalke, the general manager. Everybody I talk to says they are firmly behind Doug Peterson. They brought him over, and then as you're saying, for Peterson, it's like a breath of fresh air coming from Philadelphia, that media centric market where everybody's pounding it. Now he's kind of hiding out in Jacksonville, but there are some expectations there, especially with Trevor Lawrence being drafted number 1 overall, and
Yes.
they seem to be moving in the right direction, making the playoffs. Last year took a step back, and particularly down the stretch, they did not look good. So that's something that Khan could hold against Peterson the way this team finished. Particularly, they lost the division on like the last game of the season to the Houston Texans. So I'll say the burner's about lukewarm. I wouldn't say a hot seat. It's tough to get a coach down there. You know what I mean? That's a
So
tough place to
we're
coach.
boiling the water right now on Doug. It's not
Yeah, a
scalding, we're
little bit. Yeah,
boiling. All right.
yeah.
All right. How about McDaniel with the Miami Dolphins?
Ooh. No, I think Stephen Ross, the owner there, and Greer, the general manager, they seem to like him and his innovation. This team, uh, the Dolphins were kind of downtrodden. Nobody was really talking about them, but now they have all this offensive skill set with all these players, and now they have the mad scientist coach. They want him to be the next big Vay. I'm not sure if he's at that level, but he's done a nice job with this team. I think he's okay, but that division is going to be interesting because you have the Bills. The Jets, who we were talking about earlier, want to get a rebound. In Miami, with all that firepower, you got to put them in the mix. But it's playoffs or bust for them as well. What do they do in the postseason? Because, all those points they put up last year, they fell flat in the playoffs.
Well, yeah, and also they needed, Josh Allen ran wild, right? That Sunday night game. They beat Buffalo. They don't have to go to Kansas City,
Correct.
right? In that
Correct.
bad weather, which that was just, you know,
Yeah. Can Tua play in that cold, rainy weather?
I mean, look,
Snow
I'm not
weather.
complaining. To
I
me,
just
that was
don't think.
just, you know, stealing kid from a stealing baby, not kid, some candy from a baby, stealing a kid from a baby on that one. Friday edition of Back Your Play with Q. I'm your host as always, Rich Quinones. Follow me on IG and of course on X at Rich Q on Q. Lloyd Vance, our host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football Sports Radio 1029 FM. The Game every Monday at 8 p.m. It's great content, fast hour pace, 60 minutes, locked in all the NFL action. We'll put Lloyd on the spot. Probably needs to expand the show during the football season. We'll do negotiations down the road. But we are brought to you by Play It Again Sports and Fresh Roasted Coffee. We'll put the show link and the notes in there for that BYP promo of 20% off your first order when you check out. Um, how about you mentioned, pardon me, the AFC East, and give me, well, I guess I'll throw it to you, but I'm wondering, how about McDermott in Buffalo?
No, everybody I talk to says that the Hewlett families who owns that team, they they really like what Sean's done there, and I don't. He just got an extension as well, his general manager. So I think he's going to be around. But you just have to wonder, Q, with that window getting a little closer to closing. Josh Allen about 27, 28 now. He's not a fresh face player there, and McDermott's been there quite a while too. I think 5, 6 years. So you just wonder how much more time they have left and how much more patience this organization will have. But I'll say McDermott for now is pretty safe, but they've won a division what the last 3 years. I think they need to continue that success.
Do you have a name maybe we missed that I didn't even think of? Maybe I just totally glossed over.
The one I would say, and Angel always brings him up on my show, and I'm sure he's talked to you about it. Todd Bowles for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He just kind of another team, almost like the Saints. They're stuck in neutral. Yes, they won the division last year with 9 wins, and you just wonder, okay, was it Canales who's now with the Carolina Panthers? Or can Bowles lead? Keep this thing together and keep this team moving forward, even though they've had some defections. And really, what is Baker Mayfield as a starting quarterback? So I would put Bowles on a hot seat as well.
Isn't it interesting? And this is something we talked about in the past, and I mentioned it again earlier today on Middays with Q. When you look at all these sports, right? Let's just say a draft pick falters for the NBA. All right, we're not going to sit there and say, hey, the franchise center and the head coach, or the goalie and the head coach in the NHL, or the starting, the ace pitcher and the manager. But in football, it's always two. It's always the head coach and the quarterback. I mean, think about that really, right? Because we're always attaching wins and losses to the quarterback. We're attaching wins and losses to the coach. We're not sitting there saying, well, this franchise over 5 years was 150 and 20. We're not doing that. We're always looking at head coach 10 and 4, 10 and 4, 12 and whatever, 12 and 5, 10 and 6, 9 and 7, the quarterback. Here you go. Boom, 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 boom. And the reason I bring it up is because I feel as though in today's NFL, 15, 20 years ago, we'll draft that quarterback. He's going to sit. He's going to wait. He's either going to boom or he's going to bust. We've seen it. And maybe if you're lucky, you get the diamonds in the rough, i.e. the Tom Brady's, and Mo Lewis knocks out Drew Bledsoe and basically changes the whole complexion and course of two franchises. And the NFL, if you really think about that over the last 25, 30 years, which is another segment for another day, but they always go hand in hand. Typically, if the quarterback has a great season, they're winning games, and the head coach can kind of sit back and relax. But every time the quarterback's struggling, and we sit there and say, quarterback's got to go, then we also add, so does the head coach. I just find it interesting that only in the sport of football do we do that.
Yeah, they're attached hand and glove. It's a situation where they get too much praise when they win and too much misery when a team loses. But, they're the leadership, the faces of the franchise. And that's why everybody right away points the fingers at these two positions. And it's tough because, some coaches were better off as coordinators and they can't take that type of heat of being the head man. And then you have other quarterbacks, they may have been a superstar in college,
Yeah.
but the NFL is just such a different story, and they put so much on a quarterback line adjustments. You know, they have to be the guy in the locker room, buddy buddy with everybody. They have to be the first in practice, the last to leave. It's just a lot with that position. But also, Q, we talk about this. These quarterbacks getting paid 55 million plus. We talk about Trevor Lawrence. $55 million per season. It's just crazy the numbers that some of them are pulling down. And the coaches, you look at what Sean Payton's getting. Yeah, when you're getting a big price tag and they're trading for you, all that pressure comes along with it.
Well, and rightfully so. I mean, if we attach performance, if we criticize the players, which we rightfully do, whether we're fans or part of the media or not, we always sit there and say, oh man, well, this guy's making $50 million. He's got to play. We always put that dollar amount, that dollar figure, we attach it to their performance or lack thereof. Should be doing the same thing with the head coach. I mean, seriously, when you're wearing all these hats, like an Andy Reid, but he's been successful, or Belichick, he's been successful. Sean Payton, let's be fair here, man. You had the one run. You had some bad playoff losses, but you also played in a dome in a bad division with Drew Brees. I'm just being fair, right? And I know he cut his teeth with the Giants and like, okay, fine. And then Parcells and followed him around, got his shot with New Orleans, great run with the Saints. I just think it's a horrible fit with Denver. And I thought it was a horrible fit with him and Russ Wilson. Russ wasn't even cooking. He wasn't even marinating. We didn't even light the stove for poor Russ, right? I mean, so to your point, yeah, if I'm going to pay you all that money, if I'm locking you in, you better give me results. Those results better be W's on Sunday. And At the end of the day, you better make deep runs in the playoffs. Some of these guys can't do it, but yet they still have jobs. Explain to me how Robert Saleh still has a job. It makes no sense whatsoever.
And that's the ownership, that some of them are more patient than others. But Q, when I was cutting my teeth around the NFL, it was you didn't see many one and done coaches, but now you're seeing this more and more. Think about what happened with Frank Reich. He was
That's right.
Bloom came off the Bros real quick with him and the Carolina Panthers. I know everybody say David Tepper is a strange cat and all that,
Right.
and but the thing is, a lot of these owners they want to win now. And they're competitive with each other when they have these, spring meetings and they're all sitting around the table. Trust me, they're it's almost like fantasy football. Their buddies elbowing them and say, huh, I got the best of you again last year, and they want to prove that they can compete near the ilk of all these teams. Particularly they're all chasing Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, and the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, good point and last word to our guest, Lloyd Vance, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football, does a wonderful job tackling, covering the NFL. Follow him on X at Lloyd Vance. Give him a watch, tune in every Monday, 8 p.m., 8 to 9. You and Kevin do a great job talking football, all things alike, and really tackling and diving in to the NFL. We always look forward to having Lloyd on during BYP Middays with Q. Once the season rolls around, we'll continue our look at all these divisions to break down, but we're also going to get in some running backs on the hot seat. We kind of tackled some of the quarterbacks. We're going to look at some position players. We'll start to look at some of these future odds. We pretty much broke down the divisions, but we'll recap all of our divisional winners, preview the playoffs. I mean, Hall of Fame game is right around the corner. And it's crazy because you blink, it's going to be August, it's going to be September. And then we talked about this. As we get older, I feel as though the NFL season, September and October, here we go, we're ready. And then all of a sudden you get depressed because half the season is already gone. And then boom. But that's why we have, the availability to watch all these all-time games, all these classics. By the way, real quick before I let you get out of here, um, I've been watching the Americas game. I just absolutely they ran a marathon during I think it was 4th of July weekend. Had my notes, had my coffee, had my fresh roasted coffee, had my computer, had a little Kiki sitting there sleeping, taking a nice little nap, little siesta, and all of a sudden, boom, America's game. I'm watching all of it, and they start to creep into the 70s, and then they mention the Steelers and the Titans, and then the Oilers, and they showed the game we always like to talk about, the tippy toe with Renfro, right? And it's
Oh, yeah.
crazy because I think Dick Enberg called the game and said, well, they don't have the benefit of replay in the booth like we do. And I was thinking about you because, again, those are little quirky plays in NFL history, right? The Holy Roller, Franco Harris' immaculate reception, right? The catch. People forget about this. The catch, right? Where Walsh basically tells Montana, if it's not there, you'll simply throw it away. Well, the Dallas Cowboys had the slant play when they got the ball back, and Eric Wright made a ridiculous tackle. I think it was on Drew Pearson. He doesn't tackle him, that horse collar tackle, which they didn't call back in the day. Pearson goes for a touchdown. But point being, there's always a play or two in the course of a season or a playoff game in a Super Bowl, and it's changes the course of all these franchises. And I was thinking about you watching this. I was like, man, I wonder if Lloyd watches these marathons like I do.
I'm a historian. I just watch anything I get my hands on, particularly this time where there's not much going on. Yeah, I'll watch some little baseball here and there, but I love putting on the NFL Network and watching all those. And you're right, those teams, it's just like wow, ball bounces a different way, and it could be a different Super Bowl champion or something. But I also love the player profiles, the guys that they pick to do it. So NFL Films does a great job on those.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, all right, my friend, as always, I appreciate you joining us for this edition of BYP from our good friends over at Fresh Roasted Coffee. You'll see the promo code in the notes, and of course, Played Against Sports. And don't forget, follow Lloyd on social media platforms on X at Lloyd Vance. Give him and Kevin a tune in with Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on Mondays at 8 p.m. Broad Street South, Sports Radio 1029 FM, The Game, Southwest Florida's newest game in town, Coastal Sports Network on YouTube. He follows me on Rich Q on Q on my YouTube channel, BYP, Middays with Q. He's all over the place. He's like one of those concrete Charlies. I'm going to play both sides of the ball. You need me on offense, you got me on offense. You need me on defense, you got me on defense. We don't know if he can punt or kick, but maybe back in the day, he was able to do that. Who knows? But as always, my friend, appreciate a couple moments. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll do it again next week.
Q, thanks for having me on.